Can I really freestyle this Laurel and Hardy barbershop window signage in reverse, and without the aid of a computer-generated template or pre-drawn letters? Well, no. I personally can't. But if you would like to see if a professional time-served signwriter like Johnboy can, then please watch on. You never know. You might just learn something. Greetings brushketeers, and welcome to another traditional signwriting lesson with Johnboy. For this lesson, an old picture frame with a cracked glass pane will be standing in for our storefront window, and whilst the flow of the original 1930s lettering was compromised by the grid pattern glazing, the proportions of this glass panel will also require us to adapt our lettering to suit. And before all you Pounce painters start crying into your dippers about how this will not be an exact replication, this video is about trying to capture the zeitgeist of what it was like to be a sign painter in the early years of talking pictures. So, spoiler alert. This would not have been done with a computer-generated template. As always, we begin by establishing the horizontal and vertical center lines, followed by a first draft visual approximation of our text block positions. The base of this ribbon-style text curve is initially drawn by eye with a chinograph pencil onto what would be the outside surface of the glass. Plot points are then marked from the base for the upper lettering level, which can either be drawn freehand in a dot-to-dot fashion, or aided by running some fine line tape smoothly along this curve, and then running a chinograph along its edge before removing and discarding the tape. Working out from the center line, lightly sketch the main wording. From the same distance on the other side of the center, sketch the other half of the text in towards the center line. You can begin this stage at either left or right of center. It doesn't really matter. Refine as necessary. Establish the height and position of the secondary text. Lightly sketch the wording and refine as before. A dark backdrop has been temporarily placed behind the glass for the purposes of this video to better show the level of marking out required. And so, with our layout completed, we can arm ourselves with a dipper of white enamel, a mal stick, and a number 4 lettering pencil in pure red sable. So without further ado, let's get suited up and begin our task in hand. Our primary text will be in a thick and thin letter, with a heavy downstroke and a rounded serif. Similar to the styling of the Cooper typeface, which in the 1920s and 30s was considered to be an ultra-modern letter style. But as is the case with the vast majority of real signwriting, typefaces were originally designed for printed media, and therefore by their very nature may not always be particularly suited to real-world signage. This is where a properly trained signwriter with an artistic flair and an unquenchable thirst for all things typographic and calligraphic can really come into their own. The value of real-world experience outside the constraints of a cozy workshop or office should never be underestimated. As always, with freestyle signwriting, we never expect to get everything exactly right straight off the starting block. And as we have said in many of our previous videos, you should use the first few letters to get to know the job in hand. That is to say, you should take this opportunity to make sure that you have chosen the best brush for the job, both in size and springiness. And of course, you will find that working on glass will require your choice of brush to have that perfect blend of all the properties which make a good lettering brush. Your brush should be soft enough that it will not want to skid or skip across the slippery surface as you pull any number of different strokes, but should still be springy enough to offer just the right amount of resistance that will travel up the bristles from the substrate, through the ferrule, and up the shaft to your fingertips, where it will let you know exactly what the business end of the brush is trying to do, and exactly how you should either counteract its precocious intentions or harness the best of its properties to guide it along the right path. Every brush in your kit will have its own distinct personality, with its own strengths and its own limitations. You must build a special relationship with each and every one, and sometimes this can take many months to achieve. But only through trial and error, good times and bad, can you ever hope to attain that symbiotic harmony between soul and sable which is so necessary in the formation of a true signwriter. Remember, the brush does not maketh the signwriter. The signwriter maketh the brush. So we may think that we have chosen the correct brush for the job, and it will all be plain sailing from here. But our brush can only perform as good as our medium, or in other words, our paint. And with paint, it is all about the consistency. Every color, every brush, every substrate, and every combination of these will require its own individual set of ratios, and whilst someone undoubtedly somewhere has either made a video or a deep dive scientific study into how to achieve an optimum equation for the legion of combinations of brush, medium, and substrate, we humble brushketeers must alas revert to a thing called feel. And feel cannot be taught. Feel must be felt. Even after decades of experience in the signwriting trade, you can never foresee exactly how your first pull of the brush will react with the medium and substrate in hand. And it's not only the tangible things that can affect our brushwork. So too can the climatic conditions and the very surroundings and circumstances of our working environment play no small part in how we should approach each signwriting-related interaction. And again, this is something that will only come with experience. But we as brushketeers have chosen to work with a substance called paint. And by hook or by crook, we will soon learn that this paint can be a fickle mistress. And just like your brushes, this mistress, as well as being carefully guided, should also be respected and ultimately learned from. All in the interest of the greater signwriting good. As with any freestyle signwriting project, absolute 100% concentration is required for the actual letterwork. We are not using any pre-drawn letters here, so if that's the type of thing you are looking for, then please feel free to leave this channel and go to one of the ubiquitous Pounce painting channels, where I am sure you can learn how to do coloring in. Note how John Boy has only roughly sketched out just enough of the thicker strokes to catch the eye and remind the brain that he is working in reverse. Something that can be all too easy to forget when you are conditioned to seeing the alphabet the correct way round, and your skills have generally been honed through the lettering of many hundreds of thousands of jobs in this manner. And as seen here, a momentary lack in concentration, coupled with the lack of pre-drawn letters, can lead to minor hiccups. These rounded serifs are bracketed, which means that they appear to grow naturally out from the stroke with a curve, creating strong yet elegant base to the letters and a veritable welcoming look to the overall signage, as opposed to the almost industrial look of a slab serif. Making the initial letter of each word slightly taller than the rest of the letters is just one of many ways of utilizing a cramped space to its best advantage without the need for reducing the overall letter size or compromising the overall impact of the signage by resorting to lowercase. The premise for this Cooper-esque style follows the same basic rules for thick and thin strokes as the Roman alphabet, in that the main downstrokes are generally heavier than the thinner cross strokes, with a healthy dose of artistic freedom thrown in, of course. Well, the time has now come when we must again address one of the most no-brainer things in signwriting. A practice that causes Titanic Town Sign School increasing cause for concern, and beggars belief that such a thing should even have to be taught. Yet we find ourselves worrying that such a bad habit is starting to get out of control. So can you guess what it is? This signwriting blight that seems to be spreading through social media like wildfire? Yes, we are talking about the way in which so many pop-up influ writers have decided that a lettering brush should be held. And yes, we are talking about the seemingly ubiquitous quirk of holding the brush as far away from the ferrule as is humanly possible. A practice that shall be henceforth known as the acrylic nail hold, due in no small part to the plethora of pounce painters who apparently think that it must look in some way cool to hold a brush in the polar opposite place from where it was designed to be held. And worse still, we have even noticed that many people on social media who frankly should really know better are starting to adopt this method of brush holding, which I can only second guess as being an endeavor to try and get down with the cool kids.
Hey, Loranda. Now, I got 4 people on hold, but I can't talk.
So before any of you potential keyboard warriors blow a gasket and start trying to tell a professional time-served signwriter that the world has somehow changed, well, the world may well have changed, but brush handles haven't. And brush handles were designed in such a way for a reason. And that reason can be summed up in one word: counterbalance. And totally separate from the balancing issue, the further up towards the bristles you hold the brush, the more control you will have over it. And before ye naysayers who have possibly already invested time and maybe money in being told otherwise try to contradict us, you should maybe ask yourselves one simple question: would you hold a pen or a pencil so far away from its writing end? So if you feel the need to defend this acrylic nail hold, then please, by all means, put it in the comments below, along with your justifications, of course. And by the way, think carefully before trying to blind us with science with tales of optimum fulcrums, pivotal hotspots ad nauseum. And remember, there are no stupid questions, just stupid comments. So now that you have hopefully learned how to hold your brush like a professional, we can continue. And continue we will, with a quick crash course in the pulling of a brushstroke. In relation to freestyle signwriting, the pulling of a brushstroke should begin by initiating your landing approach. A properly loaded and chiseled brush is brought into a path aligning with where the perceived brushstroke will ultimately travel down the substrate. So that moving at a steady pace, our brush descends at a shallow angle, pushing forward through the air on a gently descending curved trajectory, whilst simultaneously preparing the brush for quite a radical but smooth U-turn. This U-turn will culminate with a smooth landing on the substrate where it will continue without stalling, and at the same steady pace whilst increasing pressure on the ferrule, which will in turn increase pressure on the bristles, causing them to want to spread out. But this unwanted spread must be counteracted by pulling back with practically every muscle in the writing hand. Along with the tip of the index finger plus all three knuckles, the wrist must also be pivoted backwards as the painted stroke continues. And needless to say, all this must be done in the smoothest of increments, so it appears to be the seamless result of one smooth motion. So basically, you should start your movement with its known trajectory. Keep an eye on and perceive where the exact point of contact between brush and substrate will be. And most importantly, keep the movement going as you contact the surface and carry on with the stroke. And whilst you are doing all this, do not look at the hairs of your brush, but look to where you want them to end up. And once you have the basic construction of the letter down, you can finish it off by adding the serifs as shown. So with the two main names completed, we can now metaphorically join them together with the word "and", which will be a much smaller version of the previous rounded serif style of lettering. If this smaller text was to be scaled down using a computer, it would undoubtedly reduce every part of its construction by the same increments, which may well look perfectly fine for printed or computer screen media. However, in a real-world situation, this could well compromise both the legibility as well as the visual effectiveness of the word. This linking word should be just big enough to register with the reader's subconscious without interfering with the general flow of the primary text. The simple swashes to the downstrokes of the N not only add an element of period elegance to the signage, but also act as a subliminal method of directing the reader's eye toward the next word, whilst at the same time downplaying the importance of this connector. So the primary text has been completed, and we can now move on to the smaller and plainer secondary text. The secondary text on this project will be of a thick and thin sans serif block letter. The same number 4 brush is used, and again, this time, the thinner cross strokes consist of 1 brush width, and the thicker down strokes are built up from 2 overlapping widths of the brush. The construction of this downstroke should therefore be broken up into 3 equal thirds of a chiseled number 4, the central third being formed by the 2 overlaps. The letter O is obviously the same no matter which side it is viewed from, but this very fact can be enough to make you momentarily question yourself, thus interrupting your flow. But we are soon back on course and we find that our N is basically the same as normal, but with the diagonal mainstroke having to be started at the opposite side from usual. Note that we have had to do a soft reset on the lettering part of our brain, and again we must use the first few letters of this different style to familiarize ourselves with the various elements that we need to call upon to produce this text. So, many people can understandably find the letter S somewhat intimidating at the best of times. But you will now see how even a seasoned professional, who can normally signwrite a letter S at the drop of a hat, can also be brought down to size when confronted with a back-to-front version of this common, everyday curved letter. The result is far from perfect, but whilst it is acceptable, the beauty of reverse lettering on glass means that it can be adjusted as necessary after a frontal viewing, without the unsightly brush marks of an afterthought stroke which would be so noticeable from the reverse of the substrate. And as the second letter O demands our undivided attention, we find that our precarious approach to the first few letters of this text block are starting to pay off. Our signwriting brain is beginning to kick in and exert its dominance over any potential namby-pamby hesitant approach to the lettering that may have been lurking over the horizon. Well, this may be no time for levity. But in the interest of brevity, we will now speed up most of the remainder of this final stage of our freestyle lettering. And without further ado, we'll see you on the other side. So just as we must slow down our video to normal speed again, so too must we prepare to bid a fond farewell to our fellow brushketeers, and thank those who have given us their undivided attention in watching the entirety of this video. P.S. Contrary to the great Stan Laurel's statement that you can lead a horse to water, but a pencil must be led, we, in the pedantic world of our brushketry, know that a pencil may also be of sable.
That's levity.